Okay. Um, so I wanted to introduce a pair of practices that are ways of training the mind, like exercises training the mind. And there's a traditional set of practices, like a set of daily meditation practices that are like daily exercise practices. These are, in fact, actually preliminary practices for meditation. That it said that if you really want to have a successful meditation, that you need certain preparatory steps. It's described as like, preparing for a nice meal, cooking and arranging the ambiance and so forth ahead of time, or preparing, with farming, plowing the field and fertilizing the soil and so forth before you plant the seeds. A traditional analogy, but I guess a more modern analogy would be working out, and doing a variety of stretches and warm ups and so forth before you do whatever is your primary workout. Which the essential practices are three. The essential ways to prepare for meditation are three. What's called accumulating good fortune. It's called accumulating merit, but accumulating a sense of good fortune is one. Purifying negativity, or purifying our internal misfortunes, the second. And then receiving inspiration, opening our mind to really be profoundly inspired. So I want to talk about the first two of those. And there's a traditional set of preparatory practices for doing these first two that are called the seven limbs, practice of the seven limbs. And I'll talk today about the third and fourth, going a little out of order, but I'll talk today about the third and fourth of those, which are confession, or purification, and rejoicing. Confession, and maybe I should say purification and rejoicing. When I say the words confession, there's like a Catholic confessional that flashes in my mind, even though when I'm imagining what other people would think of that, it's not totally unrelated, but basically it's the practice. It may be nicer to think of it as purification, give a fresh set of conceptions around that. Basically, the practice of purification has four aspects, and they're all about, but the key is acknowledging anything we've done in the past that has caused harm to others, for example, or even caused harm to ourselves, or acknowledging actions in the past where we've broken promises or harmed others, deceived others. And if we can, even broadening our mind, like just imagining whatever negativity has been created by ourselves or others, in this life, in any life, anywhere in the world, anywhere in the universe, whatever negativity there is, whatever actions of deceit, whatever actions of harm, whatever actions of self-centered, impulsive behavior, whatever actions of breaking promises there are, and so forth, all of these we confess and purify. Now, there are a few specific aspects of that I can get into, but I just want to briefly introduce the next practice as well, which is rejoicing. So confession is much more on that side of removing negativity from the mind, and you remove negativity from the mind partly just by acknowledging it. As well as some other adjacent practices that I'll mention in a second. But then the practice of rejoicing is whatever virtue there is in the world, our own virtue, but in particular the virtue of others, any actions of kindness, of patience, of generosity and discipline, meditation, learning the spiritual path, overcoming our self-centeredness or other habits of just impulsively following our normal mental pathways. whatever virtue there is, we rejoice. And rejoicing really just means being happy and joyful about our own and others' virtue. Um, Acknowledging any harm we've done, being delighted about virtue. And both of these imply having some clear distinction in our mind between right and wrong, or what's desirable and undesirable. And, there is those things, right and wrong, are not absolutes. They're not like absolutely under every circumstance, this is right and that's wrong. From one point of view, they're just concepts, but they're really important concepts. They're very much tied to our feeling of, are we experiencing good things or bad things? So we've got a very strong bias between life is great, life is terrible, right? Life is good, life is bad, this is good, this is bad. For as long as you're discriminating between outer things that are good or bad, you better be discriminating between actions and behaviors and lines of thinking that are good and bad, because some of those behaviors are going to lead you to more happiness and some of them are going to lead to more suffering. And we need to confess actions that lead us to more suffering and rejoice in actions or behaviors that would lead us or anyone to greater and greater happiness. So we are confessing or purifying, and we're rejoicing in two things: behaviors and states of mind. So negative behaviors, confessing and purifying negative behaviors, but also confessing and purifying negative states of mind, disturbed states of mind. We're rejoicing in two things as well: positive actions and behaviors, and then positive states of mind. This this twofold distinction is quite powerful. The simplest level of guiding our behavior and the simplest level of transforming our mind is changing our behavior. And the most obvious kind of behavior is physical behavior. The next most obvious, or next most subtle, whichever way you like, is verbal behavior. And then the most subtle is mental behavior. And mental behavior is a little bit different from these momentary states of mind. So you can almost distinguish four levels of subtlety as physical behaviors, and on the negative side, physical behaviors are things like killing, including killing animals, insects, and so forth, stealing, including stealing intellectual property and stealing other people's ideas, or stealing praise or whatever, killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, breaking our, acting in harmful ways out of sexual desire, breaking our commitments to our partners if we have a committed relationship, and so forth. Those actions, physical actions, more obvious, more gross, we say, in the sense of more easily recognized. Virtuous actions include abandoning killing, abandoning stealing, abandoning sexual misconduct, but also virtuous actions of generosity and so forth, outer acts of discipline. These physical behaviors, controlling physical behaviors, the most obvious, and then controlling our verbal behaviors. You might not kill someone, but you might still say something that's quite biting. I remember, I don't watch a lot of TV, but I saw Jerry Seinfeld stand-up comedy routine, and he was talking about how in a marriage, for example, you become much more refined in your language, and you no longer say, "I hate you, I want to kill you." You say, "You're so funny." It's just really a subtle way of very subtle, similar things. You get these little barbs, and we know that sometimes we can exchange these verbal barbs super easily with others. So controlling our speech is a greater level of refinement, and controlling mental But controlling our minds, the most refined area, and that really has two levels. Controlling mental behaviors. And when we say mental behaviors, we're talking about like plotting and planning. So plotting and planning, how can we, retaliate against someone or take something else, even if we don't carry it out. There's this sort of mental train of behavior. That's called a mental action. But mental actions are really just made up of these moments of mind, like mental states, some of which can be quite fleeting. And if you break it down like this process of sort of bringing our behavior under control and bringing our mental states under control, you realize that something like meditation, where you're trying to control your attention moment by moment, is really quite a refined activity. It's like, wow, I mean, I can barely control my speech. And you're asking me to control my attention moment by moment. It's a tall order. So it's actually super helpful to receive teachings on ethical conduct, right? The importance of not speaking in divisive ways. And as I'm saying these things, I'm looking off into the distance as examples of myself acting in inappropriate ways are coming to my mind. It's hard under the heat and the pressure of daily life to never, act in or speak in intentionally hurtful ways, or never speak in ways that intentionally damage others' relationships, or never to lie, or never to waste others' time with our speech. It's hard to do that, but that kind of day-to-day conduct is really part of bringing our behaviors under control, which is part of bringing our mind under control. And for people like myself who've been raised in the liberal modern West, the idea of bringing yourself and your mind under control sounds distinctly uncomfortable. Sounds downright un-American in a sense. We're the land of free choice, right? Land of freedom. You're free to buy anything you want in response to any advertisements that you've seen. But the point is, we absolutely want to control our experience. Every one of us is a little, to paraphrase that song, everyone is a freaking Napoleon. Everyone is a little control freak. Everybody wants total control over our experience. We want perfect happiness. We want everything to go smoothly. We want nobody to bother us at all until we get lonely. And then all of a sudden we want all the people to come and pay attention to us. And we want, we want everything to just go our way if we want to carry out a project. And we never want somebody else to just force us to go their way if we don't agree, right? So our wish, our deepest, most heartfelt wish, is completely unreasonable and totally unfulfillable. The way we play it out, right? The way our wish normally plays out, just the wish to have total control over our experience. The only way you can begin to get total control over your experience is to get total control over your own behavior and over your own mind. And then once your mind and behavior is totally disciplined, then you can really have a good time. Then you can really just be like, oh, you want me to do this? Sure, I'll do that. Oh, this failed. No problem. My mind is totally my own. It's totally in my control. I digress a little bit, but so when we talk about confession or purification, we're purifying negative actions, bodily, verbal, mental actions. And we're confessing these disturbed states of mind, these that are just innate and ingrained, not feeling bad about it, just like acknowledging it. When we're rejoicing in our own and others' bodily, verbal, mental actions, as well as all of these inner virtues, the sort of raw components of good behaviors and peaceful states of mind. Hopefully that makes sense. So just to explain the practice of purification briefly, and then to explain the practice of rejoicing briefly, and then we'll go in and meditate on these two practices. The reason we can become a little bit uncomfortable about purification is we don't know how to do it well. We don't know how to do it very skillfully. One way to distinguish purification practice, the skillful versus unskillful, is to think about what is the mind of guilt, right? At its root, guilt, like if you think about something that you've done that it's just so bad, just so terrible, like you, if you feel guilty about that, that means that you feel that you are inseparable from that negative behavior, and that, for example, that behavior then functions as evidence that you're not a good person, right? A very basic mind, very, very fundamental mind. We naturally mistake ourself for our behaviors and our states of mind and act and things that have happened to us and so forth. It's a complete mistake. It's a cognitive error. It's a cognitive error to identify yourself with your past misbehaviors. Whatever you've done in the past that was harmful to yourself or others that you deeply regret and so forth, at that time, based on whatever states of mind were present, that just seemed like the right thing to do. Now, in retrospect, you realize that was definitely not the right thing to do. But at the time, it just felt like you had to, right? So we were all carried by these inner and outer circumstances. We don't necessarily know how to deal with them very well. So we're quite unskillful, right? So we say things we regret, we do things we regret. It's just a lack of skill, right? It's not an indictment on us as a person. Not at all. It may indicate that we lacked the inner mental faculties to process a difficult situation better, to respond to somebody else better, to act or speak more skillfully. But it's not an indictment on us in general. Certainly not an indictment on our present self. So that guilt is when you identify with a misdeed. Purification or confession is when you acknowledge it. And it's 4 characteristics. Regret. You think, really shouldn't have done that. Really regret doing that. Not good. Reliance, which means I know that the reason I did that was because I had a flawed attitude towards others, for example, and a flawed attitude. I lacked respect for others, for example, and I lacked respect for this training in virtue that I now appreciate to be so important. So that's regret and reliance. Opponent force means I am not a bad person. I can, in fact, engage now in positive actions. And it could be any kind of virtuous action. It's like traditionally, there's a practice in the 12-step program in Alcoholics Anonymous where you make amends to someone. Like if you've harmed someone, make amends to them. You can certainly do that. But this third practice, opponent force, just means doing something that's positive to reinforce your identity as someone who can engage in virtue. So it could be giving, so it doesn't matter if the person you harmed has passed away or if you think it would be unskillful to approach them again or whatever. You just do something that's beneficial. I'm going to be a good person now. I'm going to dedicate my life to something else beneficial. And then the fourth part is the most important, is promising not to engage in that action again. And so the power of promise is what really builds this mental strength. From now on, I really regret speaking in divisive ways. I really regret criticizing that person behind their back with a harmful motivation. I'm not going to do that again. I'm only going to say things about others that I would willingly say to their face. I'm going to try to understand their behavior in such a way that we give them appropriate credit, or whatever version of it you have. And that's the power of promise. Those four together are purification. Very rich, very robust practice. Regret, reliance, changing our attitude towards others, opponent force, demonstrating our power to engage in virtuous actions, and then promise, committing to building the mental strength to not falling into that again. That's the full practice of purification. I'll walk us through that in meditation. But just to briefly explain the second practice, rejoicing. Rejoicing just means to be happy about virtue, virtuous behaviors, virtuous states of mind, our own, others, past, present, future. It is the opposite of jealousy, competitiveness, and pride. We are those minds of jealousy, competitiveness, and pride. They're kind of zero-sum minds, right? It's like seeing somebody else, like, oh, they're so peaceful, or they're so smart, or they've got such a high position, or they got so much money, or everything seems to go their way, or whatever. They're so attractive and so forth. That jealousy actually makes us feel impoverished. I mean, you have billionaires who are jealous of each other, right? You've got supermodels who are jealous of each other. You've got like people in the most fortunate circumstances being jealous of each other. Jealousy knows no bounds. But instead of that attitude, we just think, that's fantastic. I so rejoice. I so am delighted in their happiness there, and also especially in their good condition. So rejoicing in people that we think are maybe nicer than us, or smarter than us, or have more inner peace, or whatever. But in particular, rejoicing in those who have really made progress in training their minds in becoming good people. There's a lot of sources of inspiration in our modern world that people have really made great progress at training their minds, becoming good-hearted people, and those are the main ones we should practice rejoicing in. Okay, so I'll guide us through some meditation on these two, but these are trainings that we can become familiar with and integrate in our daily life. All right, so for the meditation, this is our chance to settle in more deeply to these two trainings, these two practices. So these practices themselves can be preliminaries to other meditations, but for now, we will meditate on them themselves. And our preliminary is to find a comfortable position and to imagine sitting as comfortably as we possibly can. We imagine that we're in a peaceful, uplifting, inspiring environment. We take a deep breath in and out. Another deep breath, just inviting ourselves to relax. And a third deep breath, just asking ourselves what is important right now. We continue following our breath for a few breaths, just every breath, imagining ourselves relaxing a bit more. We imagine ourselves surrounded by all living beings, and in particular, imagine our parents closest to us, surrounded by other friends, family, close co-workers. But rather than succumbing to our ordinary view of them, we imagine that they're all happy, peaceful, smiling, and delighted to be engaging in meditation along with us. And then we can train our mind in these two practices of confession and rejoicing. And we can begin first by bringing to mind some negative action that we've engaged in, that we were pattern of negative activity. Trying to bring to mind a specific example, something that we know has caused harm to others or reflects our own negative tendencies. And then we practice these four opponent powers. First, with the mind of regret. And we just think, this mind, it is like poison, or this behavior is like poison for me. It's like engaging in this action is like I've drunk poison, harming myself, building negative habits of mind. We generalize and think, what if everyone were to spend every moment doing actions like I had done? How harmful would that be for this world? So we develop regret. Not guilt. We're not feeling like we're a bad person. We just think this is like we've swallowed poison. And the second power, reliance. So we engaged in this harmful action because we had faulty attitudes towards the person that we've harmed, and we had a lack of respect or appreciation for the virtuous qualities that we really want to cultivate in our mind. So we develop a mind of respect, love for whoever we harmed, appreciation for the power of virtue, and change our mental attitude, undermining the basis for such harmful behaviors. We can engage in the practice of the opponent force, exercising our ability to engage in virtue. So, for example, we think, of course, definitely I can engage in virtuous actions. We think of something beneficial that we've done today, and we imagine taking that as the opponent force, proving that we have a good motivation, the ability to engage in positive actions. And finally, we engage in the power of promise, making and holding a strong determination not to engage in this action again, or this type of action again. And this promise builds strength and discipline in our mind. We can train in rejoicing. Rejoicing simply means to be happy and delighted in our own and others' virtue. We can think about our own meditation practice right now, how rare it is that we are using our time to cultivate our wisdom, our peace of mind, our good heart. This is not a typical way that people are spending their time. But we can think about ourselves, and we can think about everyone else who trains in meditation, everybody else who trains in strengthening their own good qualities. We just think, what an amazing quality that is. What fantastic behavior that is. And we make a just develop delight and appreciation. And that naturally encourages us to do more of it. So whatever virtues there are, past, present, future, ourself, others, human, some other world, whatever virtues there are, we delight, absolutely delight. is the most valuable thing in this world? Is it gold, diamonds, oil, money, stocks, cars? Nothing more valuable than virtuous behaviors, virtuous states of mind. They are priceless. They bring happiness. Even when we're outwardly impoverished, they bring happiness to everyone. And they bring harmony, health, well-being to the world. And then we can think through this brief time here together. We have strengthened these mental pathways, incredibly powerful mental pathways that can grow into our gaining this realization, purification, knowing how to skillfully abandon unskillful behaviors in the past, and knowing and developing the realization of rejoicing as well, knowing how to extract deep delight from virtue. If these two qualities grow and thrive in this world, it is utterly transformative. Everyone can shed their negative behaviors and adopt positive, beneficial behaviors. We can hold this powerful vision of the results of training in this way. We can make a decision to respond during our daily life. Whenever we see ourselves or others engaging in negativity, we recall this practice of purification and determine to overcome our own negativity and recognize that others are also have this ability to overcome their negativity. And whenever we see our own or others' virtue, making a determination to rejoice in these. So this is powerful.